parents come for the student, when the parent comes for the student, then the nurse will take that child out to meet their parent at the door. Our custodial staff use hydrostatic machines to clean our buildings throughout the day. High touch areas like doors in and out of the building are sanitized frequently. Our classrooms are sanitized at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. Students who ride our buses, the buses are sanitized and before the students get on each day. So at the end of the first route, the bus will be sanitized. When the buses are taken back at the end of the day, then they're sanitized again. And those are handheld hydrostatic machines that are used to sanitize our buses. We still have social distancing stickers placed throughout our rooms, throughout our classrooms and our hallways, trying to make sure that we maintain social distancing as much as possible. We all know that having young kids to social distance is a little bit more difficult than it is than for having high school kids, because they're loving kids and they like to be around the teacher in particular. And we understand that. However, we're trying to encourage our teachers to make sure we keep that to a minimum. We don't want, I would hate to have a little child come up and I'd be the person who, may have given that child the positive test result. I know all of our staff people would hate that opportunity. So again, just encouraging that as much as possible to limit the contact. We have desk shields. We just got in about 1,000 more last week to be able to have our goal is to have a desk shield for every classroom and every desk that we have. Those shields in conjunction with the mask help to cut down the distance and the flow of anything that may be viral in the room. So having those in place, again, is another safety mechanism for our students and our staff. DHEC does not require that we have shields. However, the district decided that that was something that was important enough to us to be able to make an investment to limit that control. We, as Dr. Bethea mentioned, we still have contact tracing that is administered by our nurses. And as she said as well, we've had some ads out. And I think actually a few people have been hired to do contact tracing in the last few weeks. Our elementary and middle schools do lunch and breakfast in the classrooms right now. Our elementary do lunch and breakfast. Middle school do breakfast. One of our high schools do breakfast and lunch in the classroom as well. Again, trying to minimize the number of large groups that are congregated through our schools. We find that to be a successful way of minimizing the amount of contact. In our athletics department, we've done very similar to what we do in academics every day. Our student athletes the temperatures are gauged every day. The coach has to maintain that temperature. If that child has a temperature above what is the 98.6, then that child will not be able to participate on that day. We do not allow our students or our coaches to share any equipment. If I came to practice on today and I missed something that I needed, if I have to have it to practice, then I won't be able to practice on that day. Again, minimizing any contact that may be out there. When our kids come up, we ask those questions. Have you had a headache? Have you had a sore throat, had a cough, anything in the last 48 hours? If they say yes, then we will not allow that student athlete to participate on that day. Again, just another safety mechanism to be able to try to address anything that may come about. Dr. Bethea mentioned earlier about the air ventilation. We're looking at all different kinds of possibilities. As she said, we had an independent contractor to come in and do a field grade audit of all of our buildings to assess the HVAC system, to assess the water, many of our systems. But HVAC in particular, we have some things that we know we're going to be able to do, and we're looking forward to going ahead and being able to do those. As far as ventilation itself, we're looking at various types of ventilation to be able to make sure that we have what we need in our classrooms for both our students and our staff.
Mrs. Sturkey, one of the questions that was posed about ventilation issues addressing to the beginning of the new year, and just, you know, want to make our stakeholders aware. HVAC and issues of that nature, they were addressed prior to the beginning of this year. That was part of our conversation on Thursday. When you do anything in a school system of that nature, it has to go through the Office of School Facilities. And because there's so much in terms of what school districts having funds now to finally get work done, there's so, I don't want to use the word backlog, but there's so much work that is going through the Office of School Facilities. The concern statewide is their turnaround time. And so we were notified on Thursday that the state has picked up extra staffing just to help with the Office of Independent Contractors, to help with getting some of the requests from school districts processed. And the school system, unfortunately, is not like working with your personal property where you have a thought, you want something done, you just go out and you make it happen. Even when you have the funds for it, we still have to submit our projects, a massive, that are on a massive level, to the State Department for approval through the Office of School Facilities, not Marion County, but all county districts in the state.
Sure. And the Office of School Facilities also does any construction that may have to be done. So, you know, those things are all in line, and there's several different things that the Office of School Facilities must do in order to be able to give the go-ahead to school districts. Dr. Bunch, yet anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. Just a pleasure it is to be with you tonight. Thank you for coming tonight. As Mr. Sturkey's talking, and all of us talk about this COVID pandemic, we are subject to DHEC and DHEC regulations. So as DHEC makes recommendations, we make changes. And as DHEC makes new recommendations for air ventilation or other things, we will follow suit as well. And it may seem like the mask should have been sooner rather than later. Again, we're subject to the law that the state of South Carolina allows us to do. Well, so as Dr. Bethea was stating earlier, when you're working with government entities and those kinds of things, we have to be very careful and cautious to ensure that we're following those state guidelines, using DHEC as our expert for medical guidance. And we follow those guidelines very, very closely so that we stay in line with the state law and those DHEC regulations. So as they change, we will change. As they make recommendations, we will change what we do. And as we continue to get more information about air ventilation systems, air quality, those kinds of things, and we are recommended what type of equipment to use in our schools and classrooms, I can promise you that Marion County will very seriously make every effort to get that equipment into the rooms just as quickly as possible. So as Mr. Sturkey said earlier, our team meets quite often, and it meets for long periods of time just to ensure that we're doing everything we can to make sure our schools are as safe and secure for COVID as it would be for anything else in our schools. And we appreciate your patience. And also, if you've got concerns or questions, again, there are ways to communicate with our school district so that we can hear you and hopefully find ways to better safeguard our children as we educate them.
Thank you, Dr. Bunch.
Yes, ma'am.
Before we go to Mrs. Sweeney, I just continue to respond. I just sent a link, and I do have some other communication in terms of what DHEC cites. A lot of information about masks is coming out of the American, I think it's Pediatric Association, is really the governing, I guess, entity where a lot of the most credible information is being shared from. And I do have some other communication that I can share in terms of, you know, the use of masks in school. And we're not saying that mask is their only mitigation factor. I think I've stated that earlier. But we still have a large percentage of our student population that are not within the threshold to be vaccinated. And so we have to keep that in mind. Now, once Pfizer does come out, perhaps with another age bracket for vaccines, that may be a game changer in terms of the district and what the needs are and what mitigation factors that we have in place if vaccines are now at a higher percentage rate. Our commitment to our community is that when we get new pieces of information or credible information, because we all know about research, you can find right now, I can type in any topic and I can find all the pros for that topic as well as all of the negatives for that topic. That's just how research goes. And so when I go back to the credible, and we try to make sure that we are relying on our DHEC, our experts in the medical field, the American Pediatrics Association, for the information that we have. The other question, I think that was a good question. There are plans in place to keep staff morale up. I'm gonna go while someone else is speaking. I'm gonna see if I can share an article that I read over this weekend that, when we first started school, many people thought that the focus was just going to be strictly on academics. Well, why? Because we have a tremendous need to accelerate learning. But the reality of it is that right now, adults and children are emotionally and mentally in a place that they never have been before. And so we've got to stop and take time to make sure that we take care of that component of staff. We've just started a new initiative called WOW, Working on Wellness, MCSD. And what that committee or that task force will be doing is coming up with creative ways of, they've talked about yoga time. We're making sure that we let people know about PIBA, which is our benefits, about mental health counseling, about resources that are out there just to help with staff and determine those, to help them with things that are not necessarily the teaching and learning. So often we talk about the teaching and learning, which is our ultimate goal, but we've got to be in the right mind frame, and people are just dealing with life right now. Our children are getting, reacclimated to school. If you've seen the most recent news articles around the country and in South Carolina, just the number of behaviors that kids are exhibiting, emergency room visits in terms of mental health, all of that has increased over the last couple of months. And so with that, we do have a task force. We do have Student Services Director, Mrs. Martina Rush. Mrs. Rush, original job prior to COVID was to handle the social emotional component with students. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and staff having needs, I think it was in our meeting this morning where she shared a video, social emotional needs of adults. And so we are constantly at every principals meeting, we have an SEL moment for principals so that they can carry back some of those initiatives and activities to their schools. Surveys and just checks on staff. We talked about that in our meeting today, getting a pulse to see where staff members are. We did that in the spring. We have not done it yet, trying to determine when will we do that. And so, yes, we do have some things where we're trying to keep that pulse or that temperature on where staff members are in the district. I'm looking at the mitigation factor, opening windows and using fans to improve circulation in windows. And I agree. And yes, masks are not the only mitigation factors. Our bus drivers and custodians included, they often feel unseen and unheard. Well, when I talk staff, I'll be honest, I talk staff holistically. So when I say staff, I usually don't make a differentiation between our certified and support staff. But that is a very good question, because honestly, our custodial staff, some of our support staff are, I guess I would call them front line. They are some of the people that see our children first in the morning, the first faces that they see. And so, yes, we'll make sure, and we continue to make sure that they are included. Another one question that came up concerns me, that a person quarantined yet took a reasonable time test and is negative, cannot attend school, yet still have to quarantine. Well, that's not supposed to be the case. And Mr. Sturkley, if you will correct me, and I can pull up, Ms. Wimberly, can you pull up the one pager? Because there are some shortened quarantines. If you have a negative test, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm doing this from memory, after day 5, if you have a negative test after day 5, you can return with that negative test. You just have to remain masked for the duration of the quarantine. And so that's that fine print, Ms. Crawford, but it is, if you get a negative test, and you have to take it after day 5, you can have a short quarantine and finish out your quarantine at school, but with mask on. All right, Ms. Sweeney, and I'm, keep reading. If you would give update and talk a little bit about the quarantine,
Yes, ma'am.
contact liaisons as well.
Good evening to everyone again. I'll start by talking about the quarantine liaisons. And like Dr. Bethea said, all of our schools have identified a person to serve as the quarantine liaison. And so this individual is mainly responsible for coordinating, receiving the students' work from the teacher, and then arranging pickup with the parents. So if there's a student who's going to be quarantined for however many days, the quarantine liaison will get with the teacher, make sure that they receive the work from the teacher, and then they also arrange pickup for the parents as well. And students, when they are out on quarantine, they should receive work for each subject for each day that they are absent. And also our teachers have office hours so that if our students are having trouble with the work, they may connect with their teachers virtually through the telephone during the office hours and get some extra support on the work and some assistance on the work that they are working on. We also, they also mentioned about accelerating learning initiatives. In the past, we used to just worry about what we call the summer slide. And so now, being that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're dealing with a COVID slide and a summer slide as well. And so we have some initiatives in place to accelerate learning. And so one thing that we have put in place in our schools is all of our K-5 schools now have reading interventionists, and then all of our 6-12 schools have math interventionists. And what these individuals do is that they are pulling small groups of students throughout the entire day to address specific needs. And so this serves as an extra support to our students. In our K-5 schools, our reading interventionists are just focusing on reading. And then in our 6-12 schools, they are focusing only on math. But this is another initiative that we have in place where those individuals are pulling students 30 to 45 minutes every day, and they're working with students on specific needs that they have. And then we also we have something that I call scheduling for success. We looked at our instructional day for all of our K-12 schools, and we looked closely at our instructional time. And so we have ELA frameworks and math frameworks in place. And Dr. Bethea stated it earlier. Research tells us students who struggle in reading struggle in other subject areas because it's hard to do math, science, social studies if you cannot read. And so all of our K-5 ELA classes are 120 minutes long. Our math classes, K-5, are 90 minutes. And then when we get to middle and high school, we have 90 minutes for ELA and math as well. And so we look closely at our time and made sure that we are utilizing and maximizing our instructional time. And then also we have incorporated small group time in all of our ELA and math classes, K-12. And also in K-5 classes, we have also included some time for fluency. Then all of our K-5 students have weekly communication folders. So if you have a student that's in the grades K-5, they should have a weekly communication folder. This is just a folder that all students have. It serves as a form of communication. They should bring those folders home weekly. Those folders may include the teacher newsletter, the school newsletter, important information that you may need, graded papers, etc. So you should see those folders coming home every week. I was in a classroom today and the teacher had the students pull out the communication folders to put a piece of paper in that needed to go home to the parents. So we should see those in all of our K-5 schools. And also we have a new math curriculum in grades K through 8. This curriculum resource is called Into Math. Still teaching the math, the South Carolina College and Career Ready math standards, but we're just using a new curriculum to teach those math standards. And that math curriculum is called Into Math. Interim reports. Interim reports went home about 2 weeks ago, September 28th through the 30th. Interim reports were sent home. And schools had virtual conferences. Parents could have gone online and signed up for virtual conferences to meet with their child's teacher. Report cards will be issued on October 27th. I think the end of the first 9 weeks may be October 20th. Don't quote me on that. but report cards will be sent home on October the 27th. So we're encouraging parents to utilize Parent Portal. That way they can go in, track their child's attendance, but most importantly, check their grades as well. And that is my update for teaching and learning.
Thank you so much. Ms. Wimberly, can you share the communication that was sent out from the state, from the pediatric?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, thank you.
If I can.
While she's trying to share that, the only other point that I did not emphasize when I went over information is we do encourage our families and our parents to use the platforms that we do have in place. We do have school improvement councils, which are legislatively mandated, which all schools have to have, with elected and appointed persons on those committees. Now, PTOs and PTSAs have not met as much just due to health and safety protocols, but they are still in place, and we hope to see even more this year. Many schools have moved to more virtual meetings. We also do have our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We hope that you are following us on those various handles. We have the old-fashioned district website. A lot of times people forget about just the school district website, where we have a plethora of information. And then we also have the Marion County School District app, where you can follow the district, and it's in the App Store for Android and Google, where you can follow all of the district in every school, or you can pick and choose which schools that you follow to be able to get updates. Just going back to the question of, this is something that was recently sent out to school superintendents regarding masks. And so again, and it goes down, it just talks about some of the research that they have. And again, we do know two things: that the court ruling is going to be challenged, is being challenged by the governor. And so there may be changes in terms of whether we can mandate masks or not. But again, right now, knowing that we have a large percentage, as I stated earlier, percentage of our students that cannot be vaccinated, we are using any mitigation factor that we have at our disposal. It does quote research studies going back up to mask and about being a protective measure. And again, we respect the varying opinions on masks. Do know that we hear from parents and community members on both sides. But at the end of the day, right now, we're trying to use every mitigation factor that is accessible to us to keep our students in school. And that's what it's all about, keeping our children here in school where they need to be. Hopefully we've covered all of your questions. Please do not hesitate. If you have additional questions, reach out to us. Even though we use the table talk, what are some ways that the community organization can do to help students and staff? I mean, a lot of different ways. I do know that Ms. McKenzie, your sorority helps us tremendously. The resources that you have been providing, just random acts of kindness, even this summer, doing with summer reading camp. I think that you came and provided gift cards to staff. Morale boosters is a major factor. Any type of, PPE, any donations, and just simple support, helping us get the right communication out. I think one of our biggest challenges, it's a great thing to have social media, but sometimes just the social media being a voice to get the correct and accurate information out to people that you may have influence with. I think that is the biggest thing. I think the more that we can combine efforts and making sure that the right information, the right narrative is being told, because one of the things when you put bad information out there, I don't care how much you try to retract it, when it's out there, whether it's true or not, it is almost impossible to overcome. And so that is the biggest thing. And then sharing suggestions and ideas. Now, I will tell you right now, I have in play, tomorrow I may meet with a tall teacher advisory lunch and learn. I have a support staff advisory. I have a parent advisory. I have a student advisory. In the past, I've had a retired educator advisory. And then I attempted at one time to do a community group, but my turnout was very low. So I did not do the community advisory last year. I did table talk in lieu of. And so this year, that's why I'm doing these virtual table talks as a way to reach the community as a greater whole. And then I have a faith-based advisory at pastors. And this year, my faith-based advisory, I think I've changed that. I can't remember the date of the first one, but I've just changed that to a conference call with clergy, just trying to make it more convenient for them. And so I do have that coming up soon as well. But so encouraging people to, just to get involved, encouraging parents to get involved. And another big thing for us, how can support students. Right now, our students are struggling. We try not to use the term learning loss, though you can lose learning, but we rather say academic recovery. And with that, just simple things. For instance, I just asked our teaching and learning team to get high frequency word lists together, and so that we can do a challenge for families and communities to get help us get our children reading. Many people don't believe this, but just by having exposure and knowing those sight words, high frequency words, improves the fluency and reading of children. So it's just spending 5 minutes a day of helping children learn those high frequency words. And so helping with that, just those simple things. We are too about to start an initiative, the cutting edge of literacy, where we'll be putting books in the barbershops. Ms. Whitney, can you speak to that for just a moment? Or Mr. Sturkey, they're kind of jointly working on that together.
You want me to? So the cutting edge literacy is where we'll focus on putting books in the local barbershops. And so our books have arrived and we are ready to kick off that initiative. So the goal is that when students come into the barbershop, instead of sitting there playing on a device or just sitting there waiting patiently, that they will pick up a book. And so the barbers, we have spoken with the barbers and they are on board with this initiative. And so they're going to encourage the children to read those books. And also a few of them are willing to go above and beyond and ask some questions about the book as well, to make sure that the children are really reading the books. And so that is one of our initiatives of trying to increase literacy, especially in our male students as well, to increase that love for reading and to have some independent reading time as well. And so we are excited to kick that initiative off, if not this week, next week.
Thank you, Ms. Sweeney. And so to answer that question as a summary, we welcome any support, any ideas that you may have. I often say it takes a village. So any ideas or thoughts that you have, please share them. Another question, do we intend to require masking indefinitely if the vaccine rate does not reach 75% among staff and students? In all honesty, I'll tell you, I struggle with this. Like I have it off right now. I went to meet with the staff this afternoon of a faculty meeting, and there were several times I just wanted to pull it off, but I know as a leader, I had to keep it on. And so to answer that question, we know that we'll never get back to normal, Mr. Burden, but we do know when our numbers are much lower and when, if we have large amounts of vaccinated students, our spread level is lower, then I think at that time is when we can start eliminating some of our mitigation factors. Now, I will say this, there's some mitigation factors I think need to stay permanently. I think some are just good old fashioned good practices that I think it took COVID or the pandemic to make us realize were a need. Wiping down door handles as periodic times during the day. I think those are good mitigation factors that need to stay whether you have COVID or not. But in terms of the masking is just in that. I mean, we don't know how long. It could be next week where it's back state law, and we could be back to choice masking, which I will say that when we were choice masking in the district where it was not required, we still had over 90% of our students and staff in masks. And so And you know, people were just making those personal decisions that this was a mitigation factor they wanted to use. So we did not have those concerns of people not being masked in the district, and that was with it being their own decision. Well, I want to thank each of you. You know, hopefully something that we shared today was helpful to you. I will do another round of the virtual table talks. Prior to COVID, another platform that I had in place were living room listening sessions, where I started asking community members to host their neighbors or close friends, anywhere between 8 to 10 people, and we would go into the homes. Ms. Wimberly would go with me, and we would just have communication about what was going on in the schools, the happenings of the district, and a lot of the conversation trying to gauge people about the possibility of a consolidated high school. We started that conversation in those platforms too. But unfortunately, right now, due to COVID, I think that the community liked those sessions. We thoroughly enjoyed those sessions of going into the homes of our community members. But right now, that is just not something that we can do under the present circumstances. But we will continue these virtual town hall sessions just to make sure that the right information is getting out. Again, I know that we cannot cover everything. There's so many moving parts in the system, but hopefully we said something today to help you to be able to better understand the different logistics and dynamics that's around our system. Thank you all. I've got to get to a Mullins Marion rival football game that was postponed from Friday when the beautiful weather was out on Friday. And I think today looks worse than it did on Friday. And so heading over to Foxfield right now. So don't state which team you want to win. We're going to support Marion County. So thank you all. Have a good one.